Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Thriving LDS Singles podcast. We're so excited to have you here, and I have my co-host, Kim. Hi, Kim.
Hello.
And today we're talking to Kim's son, Dakota. And we're talking to him not just because he's Kim's son, but because he's a family therapist. And we thought that that would be a really interesting topic to talk about. But let me just tell you a bit about Dakota. Oh, hi, Dakota.
Hi.
Hi. So let me just tell you how fantastic this guy is, not just because he's Kim's son. He grew up in the Salt Lake Valley, dedicating a good majority of his time to running. He looks like a runner, doesn't he? And he runs across the nation after countless miles exploring various jobs from plumbing to bartending on a train to Alaska. Nice. He finally pursued his long-standing interest in becoming a therapist. These diverse experiences have provided him with a unique lens through which he views the world. He earned his master's in marriage and family therapy from Utah State University, where he developed a passion for helping clients understand attachment and violations of love and trust they've experienced. In working together, he'll explore not only those love and trust violations in relationships and family dynamics, but also in the internal conflicts within yourself. His approach involves examining the cycles and patterns in your relationships to restore love and trust to the areas of your life and parts of you that need it the most. Outside of therapy, he enjoys spending time with his wife, engaging in outdoor activities like mountain biking, canyoneering.
Canyoneering?
Yeah. Climbing, camping, and backpacking outdoors. So welcome, Dakota. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you.
We wanted to specifically talk to you about the therapy side. And do people really need therapy? Like, is it something everybody should do, or only those who are in crisis, or like who should do therapy?
Yeah, I mean, typically we see people who should have come to therapy a lot sooner. Usually they're too deep in crisis, and especially in terms of like divorce, usually people wait until it's been too long and one of the partners is leaning too far out of the relationship to really be willing to put in the work that is required. So yes, I think everyone can benefit from therapy, but I think that looks different for everybody. So if you're in more of a crisis time of your life, then maybe therapy looks like a more weekly thing for you. And if you're feeling pretty good, maybe you check in quarterly and you meet with your therapist quarterly to make sure that you're still engaging in the positive things that help us to have a healthy lifestyle.
Sounds good.
So
but how do we know who to, like, because you're a marriage and family counselor, like as singles, would we choose you? Why would we?
Yeah, so the biggest difference in therapists, so there's marriage and family therapists, or LMFTs. There's licensed clinical social workers, and this is in the US. I don't know what it's like in Australia for UK. There's clinical mental health counselors, CMHCs, and then there's psychologists. And all four of them are different, but they all do therapy. There's also psychiatrists. Psychiatrists specialize a lot more in like medication management than they do actual talk therapy. Marriage and family therapists are trained to view things systemically. So we're looking at the whole family system, working with couples where we are trained to work with individuals. But with an individual, it's going to look a lot more like evaluating the relationships in their life and how that impacts them and how we can structure those things to help manage their mental health. And so while there's only one person in the therapy room, we are still going to look at what are your relationships like with your parents and what needs to change with your parents or with your kids. That appeals a lot more to me, because if a client comes to me and I help them overcome their anxiety or depression, and it's a result of their relationships that they have, that as soon as they go home and they go back to their relationships, then they have a hard time with it again. And if I can help the whole family system structure change, then we see a lot better long-term results.
No
And
one's
then,
no one's really an individual, are they? There's
right.
lots.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody lives in a vacuum, and problems don't happen in a vacuum either, right? If we were in a vacuum, then yeah, maybe we wouldn't need therapy, but it'd also be a really sad life because
Right.
we do need connection.
Yes, yeah, that's really important. And so, like, I had the same thing. I work as a counselor, and I was working with step families, and I used to find that by the time they came to me, I'd be like, oh, like, why didn't you come to me a couple of years ago? It's just so frustrating, isn't it? So how do we
Yeah.
know when it's time? Like, even with a marriage breakup, it's like, as you said, usually by the time someone decides to come, the other partner's like, oh, I'm actually out of here.
Yeah.
How do we know?
I think, I mean, that's a hard thing, right? And there's so much stigma around mental health, negative stigma, right? That people try to take an approach of, I'm just going to gut through this and we're good. We're going to figure this out. We're going to get through that. And it is true. People are really resilient and they do get through a lot of things.
Or common in our culture, in the LDS culture, is we're just supposed to pray about it and read our scriptures and go to the temple and it'll all work out. I mean, even we get that guidance often. So we have that we're trying to figure out in relation to therapy too.
Yeah. And those things do help. I go through, it's called the biopsychosocial spiritual model, and it goes through the client's biology, it goes through their psychology, what their social circles are like, and then the spiritual aspect of their life. And I go through that with all of my clients, whether I'm in Utah. Both of the therapists that I'm working under right now are only licensed to work in Utah. So I do see a lot of people who are LDS, but those that I don't see that aren't LDS, I still go through the spiritual component because it's an important piece to be in tune with those things. And it's a huge support for everybody. And it is really important to go through and look at, if they value scripture study, are they doing it? And if that's something that benefits them in their mental health and they're not doing it, well, maybe we should look at that. But yeah, I think, remind me what your question was.
Sorry, I distracted you. It was, how do we know when we should go to therapy?
Oh, yes.
How do we make sure we don't wait till it's too late?
Yeah. I mean, that one's really hard because you do have to be in tune with yourself. And a lot of times people just don't have that. I don't know what the right word is for it.
Self-awareness or awareness of what's happening around them.
Yeah. They just don't have the self-awareness to be able to recognize, like, life kind of sucks right now. Or I need to get help, right? If I focus a lot on attachment, and people who grew up with a working model that they have a positive view of themselves, but not necessarily a positive view of others, they're going to be a lot quicker. And even like across cultures, we see this too, right? In very individualistic cultures versus collectivist cultures, they're going to be less likely to want help. They're going to want to figure those things out on their own because they trust themselves to be able to figure things out, right? If they grew up having to be really independent, they weren't able to rely on mom and dad for whatever it was that they needed in their really early years, when they were developing, then they're going to say, oh, I've always figured this out on my own, and I will. And those who weren't given the autonomy to figure things out for themselves are going to be really anxious sometimes. And sometimes they're going to be really quick to seek out a therapist, and they're going to be in crisis quicker, saying, I can't do anything on my own, and I really desperately have to reach out to people. And so it varies from person to person. And I think it's really hard to say, like, this is how I'll know when I need therapy. But I would say if you're having the question, like, oh, maybe we should go to therapy, I think it's fair to at least give it a shot.
As soon as that thought comes into your brain, it's probably time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I gosh, this was 12 years before I got divorced, maybe, or 10 years about, maybe. I was seeing a coach, and I was trying to improve my life and get, improve in all these areas. I wanted to set some goals and achieve my goals. I've had a long time goal of writing a book, but I decided that I was going to hire this coach to help me. And when I talked to the coach, and now looking back at it, I think, yeah, I should have seen some signals that maybe I should have been talking to somebody about this stuff long ago. But I basically told him, we can talk about anything and set goals in any area, but anything to do with my husband or our relationship is off limits. Like, I kind of had this inkling that it wasn't, like, there was some things that I was maybe holding myself back, or I wasn't reaching my full potential because of some things there, but it was just like this inkling. And probably if I would have taken that more serious, but I agree with what you're saying, is that you have to be ready too. Like, I probably wasn't emotionally equipped or ready to go see somebody at that point in my life. So it does also probably depend on that a little bit too. I mean, even though we might feel like, oh, that was too late, you also have to be emotionally equipped to be able to, and maybe you can speak to that, because maybe I have a false belief there that you can help somebody through that or navigate their way through that. I don't know.
Yeah, if someone had come to me and said everything but my marriage, I'd go, oh, let's work on the marriage.
And I would probably fight with them to get their partner in the therapy room as well. Whatever I could do to get their partner in. Sometimes that isn't the case and we're not able to do that, but it's really hard to do relationship work when only one person is coming. There is a book it's called It Takes One to Tango. I haven't actually read it, but I just think the title is relevant, because you can do things with only one person if the partner isn't willing to come in. But it's a lot easier for me to work with a couple if we're trying to improve relationship dynamics, to recognize the cycles and patterns of the couple as a whole, how they interact with each other. If they're having this conversation and something comes up, I can pause them and say, wait a second, what if we say it this way instead? And I can kind of coach them through that, where if only one of them is there, then I don't get that opportunity. I've even done that with siblings. I worked at a high school up here in North Utah, and I had siblings that were working on completely different things, but I wanted to work with them in the same room so that they can have somebody to practice with and go about those different things. And so it just varies.
I found that a lot of issues actually to do with self-love. So even when it's a marriage issue, it's like if the other person says, I love you, and you go, yeah, I'm not sure. I don't think I'm all that lovable, like inside their head, they're sort of pushing the person away. So it's really about what's going on inside me. What's your thought?
I conceptualize everything from violations of love and trust. Some people would refer to that as like an attachment injury or an attachment wound. Or some people would even just call it a trauma, whether it's a big T trauma or a little T trauma. And I would agree. I would say that what you just described is more like a violation of trust, where they don't quite trust this other person and what they're saying. And I think other times if you name an emotion to me, I can pretty quickly tie it to either some sort of violation of love or trust, whether they feel invalued or whatever it is.
If they have low like if they just feel unlovable, no matter how many times you tell them that somebody says, I love you, they're not going to trust it because they don't internally feel like they're lovable, right? Or
right. Yeah.
Is that what
so
you're
that
saying?
trust probably come from parents, not the person that's actually in front of them.
Yeah. A lot of times, one intervention that I actually really love doing with people, it's really, really cool. It's a reparenting exercise where I have them think of the very, very first time that they experienced whatever emotion it was that is troubling them. And we go back to that time in their life, and I allow them to spend time with that younger version of themselves and to build a place of safety with them and of love and trust, and be able to find out what it is that that younger version of them needed in that moment, whether it was, oh, I just needed like somebody to talk to. I was having a really hard time at school, or I was getting bullied, or that there's so many different things, right? And then I allow them to go back to be with them and sit with their younger self to experience it and feel what it's like to feel what they were feeling, so they can truly offer what it is. They can go back and be like, now I'm 30 years old, and I know that you felt really dismissed at that point in your life, in that experience. And so I just want to sit here and let you tell me that story. And this is all, going on internally for them, right? And it's really cool to see them be able to offer that to themselves and have that self-love and that experience, and recognize, like, wait a second, I am worthy of love. Like that's just something that's inherent in me because I'm a child of God, or whatever it is. So
Yeah, that's actually, that's pretty much what I do, because I use the EFT and matrix re-imprinting, and that's what we do, is we take people back to their memories, early memories, and work through those. They ignored me, they didn't treat me well, they yelled at me, whatever,
yeah
and redo it. And there's a lovely saying, it's never too late to have a good childhood. I like that. And that's what I've discovered in my life. But yeah, it took me 50 years or something to discover it. It's like, it'd be nice to help people sooner than that, wouldn't it?
Yeah. And I think access is becoming more available to be able to have that sooner. And I also think that we live in a society now where we have capacity to prioritize things like that. If you go back into the early 1900s, everything was just about providing food on the table, and that's all that life was about. And now we have food very readily available in a lot of the world, right? Most of the world, I'd probably say. And so now people say, like, we're in a mental health crisis, and it's like, well, we just actually have capacity to pay attention to our mental health, because before we didn't. Before it was just about whether we had food on the table or not. And
that's a good
something people don't recognize sometimes.
As you do, you wonder, why is it so bad? But yeah, that could be it. It's just that we've finally got time to, we're not starving or in 12-hour days manually.
It's a good perspective. So Dakota, you mentioned that you have some favorite things that you do, but there are a lot of varieties of modalities, even just in family therapy, right? Like how did you decide what to specialize in, or what do you use? Maybe give us some background on that.
It very much depends on the graduate program that you go through. So some graduate programs make you try a specific therapy for each semester, and then you decide which one fit best with you. In our program, we take a few classes where we go through all of the different models, and they just kind of tell us to, maybe with this client, try this model and see how it feels for you. With this client, try this one, see how it feels for you.
And give us some example of models, just for people that might not know what a model is. Or
the most common one that people will know is cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. It's been around the longest. It has the most research done. Other things are emotionally focused therapy, EFT. Is that the same EFT that you were referring to, Kay, or different EFT?
Different. She
That's what I thought.
Tapping like me.
Yeah, that's what I thought, but I wanted to clarify. So there's emotionally focused therapy. That's really big right now. Internal family systems is really big right now. EMDR. eye movement desensitization and
Yeah,
processing.
EFT I do and EMDR are very similar. That's the same.
Yeah. So that's becoming really big right now. Another one that I'm trained in is accelerated resolution therapy, which is very similar to EMDR. I know one of the biggest differences is that, yeah, so EMDR takes a few sessions. I've seen a lot of really positive results with accelerated resolution therapy, even after just one session. I've had people who won't go to sleep because they're worried that they're going to relive their nightmare, their trauma, their whatever it is. And I've done accelerated resolution therapy, which still uses slow eye movements, and they've been able to sleep through the night that night without any of the horrors, the night terrors that they were experiencing.
That's yeah, for people with
that's awesome.
trauma
Yeah.
stuff.
The biggest difference that I've been able to see is, and as I've listened and gained further understanding of trauma, the reason that I really like accelerated resolution therapy is because it not only desensitizes your brain to the traumatic experience, but then it also replaces that negative experience with a positive experience, which they found to be really important in trauma therapy.
Yeah, that's what I do is like, okay, we deal with the trauma, and then we like, now what would you have liked to happen?
Yeah.
Some people to come give you a cuddle. Who would you like? Bring in the grandma that you liked and an angel, whatever you like, and bring them all in and get the cuddles and get the the attention or the words or whatever it is you would have liked.
Yeah.
And I suggest they use that as their when they go to sleep at night, think of those, reinforce that sort of that positive. And
yeah,
it's quite powerful, isn't it? Just like,
yeah, it is really cool.
So let's talk about the specific. These are single people. Many of them have been through divorces, that sort of like too late to save that marriage, looking at another relationship, realizing that they could make some of the same mistakes, not wanting to, being scared to start new relationships. What's your advice?
Yeah. I mean, I think ignorant is kind of a strong word, but I think it's somewhat ignorant for somebody to get a divorce because something isn't working in their relationship and hop right back into a relationship expecting something to have changed. Because like we were saying earlier, things don't happen in vacuums. No. You are contributing to something just as much. And so in my therapy rooms, you're gonna see both partners working to change things. I'm not just gonna, there won't just be one partner changing things. Both people have to change things to make things work. And so ignorance is kind of a strong word for that, but I think without going through and doing the work,
like being blind, like it's like you think, oh, it's going to be different. Yeah, it's scary when you see someone getting remarried within the year, isn't it? It's like, have you done the work?
Yeah, and sometimes people have, right? Sometimes they've gone through that and they're like, oh, I'm never going to let that happen again, and they go through and they do the work. I also believe that you can get married to somebody and still be doing the work, right? Even if it is only a year, you can be working on those things.
There's not I'm going to wait until I'm all better. That's
right. That's not how this world works. We know that. But I think you do have to put in the work. That's one of the biggest determining factors actually for therapy is 40% of the outcomes for therapy are dependent on the client factors. So what the client comes in with, their willingness, their readiness, whether.
So no matter what the therapist does, 40%, is that what you're saying, is up to the individual and these are the factors.
Yes, they can buy a treadmill, but if they just put it in the garage and don't ever use it, then it's not going to improve their physical health.
Gee, on.
Yeah, we all are feeling that cost of the treadmill.
Yeah. And so a lot of people, a lot of times, right, they'll come to therapy and be like, oh, nothing's changing. Well, you're right, because nothing changes if nothing changes. And so you do have to put in the work. 30% of it is the therapeutic alliance. And so it is important when you're trying to pick a therapist, being able to see like not even necessarily like how they do therapy. That is important to a certain extent, right? It actually is broken out into a percentage. It's only 15% is dependent on how the therapist does therapy, what model they use. And so more of it is like the therapeutic alliance and how your relationship is with the therapist. And so finding somebody that you get along with, that you feel comfortable talking to and sharing things with is really, really important. And then the other 15% of those outcomes is the therapist's ability to engender hope. And so I think the biggest things when you're looking for a therapist really is just getting a feel for the fit. And that's something that you can't do in one session. I mean, sometimes you can, but it's not very often that you're able to look and see like, okay, I know exactly who I'm going to pick now because of this one session. Because relationships take time to build, whether it's a therapeutic relationship or not.
I know that when I once had a therapist, only twice, but I mean, I've had more therapists for longer terms, but this particular therapist, I went to him and I didn't feel, I'm a very passionate LDS person. I mean, I love my Heavenly Father. I love the gospel. And so I was holding back because I didn't feel comfortable with this particular therapist and talking about my religious beliefs. And that was like my indicator. Like if I'm not willing to share anything with my therapist, that's probably not a good fit. What would you say about that? Or
I would say, well, I would ask, did you talk to the therapist about that before you
I don't recall. It was a long time ago.
Because
that's a good question, right?
Because
like,
spirituality is one of those
me,
things,
or...
right? Where especially while I was at the university, it was kind of an awkward thing to bring up, right? Because I'm at this university setting. And so it's like, oh, do I bring up spirituality? Are people wanting spirituality out of this? And so we just have to be curious as therapists and ask those things, right? And hope that if we do miss that for somebody, that they're willing to bring up and say like, hey, I haven't felt comfortable talking about spirituality, and that's something that's really important to me. What can we do about that moving forward?
Yeah, because even just saying that, which I really appreciate, I mean, I could do that now, but back when I was like not emotionally really very equipped to handle stuff, I probably wouldn't have even had the foresight to ask that question in that way.
Yeah. And I think part of that also, we talk about in my graduate program, they talk a lot about, building a culture of feedback that begins in the very first session. And if that therapist didn't build that culture of feedback for you, then you didn't feel comfortable giving them that feedback. Right. And so that makes it harder too. So.
Yeah, I'm the same as you, Kim. I don't know if I would have I would just go, we're not working, and just not make another appointment, rather than tell them why it's not working and ask if they could fix that.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
And that's part of relationships. Like we have to figure those things out as far as any relationship goes, being able to do that and say, hey, this isn't working out for me. We need to change this and work on this.
Good idea. Kim and I will keep working on that.
Yeah, I was going to say that's probably telling as to where Kay and I are in our relationship skills.
Our relationship skills. All right, Dakota, is there anything else you'd like to sort of, tell the audience as like things that you feel are really important for people to know?
I think I started to bring it up, so I'll go back to it just because I did bring it up. But but just kind of the different therapists so that people know what they're getting into. Because there's marriage family therapists, clinical social workers. They're going to have a much stronger emphasis on social justice and being able to support you, and they're excellent at resourcing. That's something that they're amazing at, is knowing the resources available and helping people access those and use those.
They have a more community focus. Is that what you're saying when you say
Yeah.
resources? Like,
Yeah, they do have a lot more community focus and things like that. Psychologists are going to spend a lot more time on diagnosing and doing assessments, very in-depth assessment, whether that's ADHD or autism spectrum disorder or whatever it is. Those are just two very common ones that people go to psychologists for. Obviously, we talked about marriage family therapists are going to place high value on systems and relationships. And then CMHCs are going to focus a lot on like current well-being. I don't know tons about CMHCs. I know they get really good training, but I don't
Say
know.
what that is again, to say the whole.
Clinical mental health counselor.
Right.
Yeah. So
there
I
are
think-
an awful lot of choices. It's hard to know, but I mean, probably for the singles and just knowing that they've ended up being single for one reason or another, relationships is probably a pretty important thing for them to be focusing on, I would say.
Yeah, if that's it really just depends. And there's social workers who are great at working with relationships. There's marriage family therapists that are going to be great at using the community resources and things like that. And so it just varies.
What about if you're struggling? Because I know one thing that comes up is addictions, like addiction to porn. So is that something typically that has a relationship aspect to it, or do you deal with addiction, or is that?
Yeah. In fact, one of my professors, all he does is study addiction. He goes very, very in depth with addiction. He's an incredible addiction therapist. He specializes specifically with substance use, but a lot of it carries over to pornography. They're all coping mechanisms and negative coping mechanisms at that, obviously. But marriage family therapists have a lot of experience with pornography because it does come up in a lot of relationships.
Yeah,
And it is something that a lot of people in relationships struggle with. And so I do have a lot of experience with that and navigating that.
So really, I think the summary of that would be, it's rather than their qualification, it's, do you get on with the person, and do you feel that they can help you with your particular issues?
Yep.
So,
and then also just lastly, because I know we're running out of time, I've been waiting so long to have Dakota on because there's so many things related to therapy that I want to do deeper dives in, just like even attachment theory or a lot of the myths that are out there. But one thing
you can tell them to put things in the comments and we can address them later.
Oh yeah, there you go. And we'll do a post on when we post it of what else do you want to hear about or talk about. But your modalities, you mentioned art that you use for trauma. What are your most common go-tos that you use?
Yeah, I use a framework it's called restoration therapy, and I blend it a little bit with internal family systems. I intermingle them pretty evenly, honestly. Restoration therapy is rooted in love and trust, like we were talking about earlier. Restoration therapy, it's built on emotional regulation, attachment, and mindfulness. And I really, really like restoration therapy, especially from a spiritual aspect for me, because it's based on the tenet that everybody is inherently good, which I do believe. We are all God's children. We do have the things within us to be able to go through this life. I don't believe in a God that would put us in this experience without the resources necessary to get through it. And it focuses on cycles, pain cycles and peace cycles. A pain cycle is made up of our feelings and negative coping behaviors. Typically, negative coping behaviors don't satisfy the feelings that we're experiencing. So if
Short
we're
term.
feeling lonely and we turn to pornography because we're trying to get connection, we're not actually going to get connection out of that. In fact, we're actually going to feel even more isolated and lonely. And so that would be a pain cycle that feeds into itself. And then the peace cycle is made up of truth. So what is the truth? Maybe it's that I have people that I can rely on. I can trust people, or I am lovable. And then action, and being able to use agency and action to use that truth, right? Being able to say, like, wait a second, actually, I am feeling lonely, but, and normally in the past, I would have turned to pornography, but I'm really loved. And I have these kids that love me and rely on me. And so instead, I'm going to go play with them and be with them so that I can feel of their love and actually have the connection met. And then you're using your agency. You're not being acted upon. Turning to pornography is reactive. It's not an action necessarily that people are choosing. It's just a reaction from feeling lonely or whatever it is that they're coping with.
Carbs.
Yeah, that's right.
That's my coping mechanism.
Our addictions, yeah, our addictions are chocolate, bread.
It's really no different though. It's still not healthy.
But that's the thing, right? Is you can say, sometimes people take exercise too far, right? And it becomes a negative coping behavior. It becomes reactive because they can't manage their emotions. And other times people can use exercise out of agency and say, no, I'm going to go exercise because this is what I need to do to regulate my emotions.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's right. So it's that balance, isn't it? It's
Yeah. Who's in control? We've talked, Dakota, about your common saying about you're only as sick as your secrets, but one of the other ones Dakota taught me is
actually comes from Spencer, my professor that studies addiction. But
this might come from him too. Then Dakota says, "Who in the room are you giving the megaphone to?" Which
actually,
I've been thinking
that
about.
comes from Ryan. He's one of my other professors, but yes.
It's like, who has the megaphone and who am I giving my power away to, or who am I trying to please at the moment or whatever. So I like that. Say it one more time. I have been actually thinking about it a lot lately.
I mean, usually the question that I ask clients is, who has the megaphone right now? Who is it that's saying that? What part of you is it that's saying that? Is it the lazy part of you? The critical part of you? What part of you is it that's saying that? Who has the megaphone?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's ourself, and then it's full of compassion and confidence and clarity.
that lazy part of me talks quite a lot.
What is it protecting you from?
Being super. I don't know. So it's like, do I want to go for a walk now? No, I don't want to go for a walk now. It's
Yeah.
Will I eat some vegetables or some chocolate? No, I'll eat chocolate. Like, yeah, I don't know.
But it has a purpose, right? Like it does protect you from something. And that's really important. It's not maybe doing it in the best way, right? There's better ways that we can do those things.
Yeah, I don't know why I would want to be protected from achieving my goals. Why would I want to be protected from that?
I would say that it probably goes deeper than that, but
Probably.
yeah. Well, this is not a therapy session.
All right, everybody. Well, ask your questions of Dakota. Let's hear all of the things that you'd like to have further discussions about, and we will get him back and we will do some, how we could improve ourselves.
Yeah, definitely do some deeper dives. And Dakota, I'll put your information if people want to get a hold of you that are in Utah or
But the practices?
Yeah, the two practices that you're working on.
So right now I'm only doing telehealth sessions until we move to St. George in sometime in July. And so my clients have to be in Utah because that's where we're licensed.
Mhm.
But I am working for Adam
Anywhere in
Johnson.
Utah. You work with anywhere in Utah, though.
Yeah, yep.
That
So
sounds great.
living in Cache Valley, but can see anybody in Utah right now. And that's Adam Johnson is my supervisor at one of the practices, and he owns Mountain Medical Family Therapy. So with those clients, it's a lot more collaboration with doctors and things like that.
Integrated medicine.
Yeah, much more. And then I'm also working for Cecily Ott, who owns Desert Consulting, and she's down in St. George. And once we get down to St. George, then I'll be able to see clients in person down there as well. So
That sounds great. Well,
yeah.
thank you, Dakota, for being part of our podcast today and talking about therapy.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Kim.
Glad to have you on, Dakota.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
Ask questions, everybody.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.